If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is not about burning cars. This revolution is about building our own cars and selling them to make money. Essentially, this revolution is in the mind, because if we are not in charge of our mind, then our bodies will be the tools of the people who are oppressing us, to oppress us and to oppress our people. Peace and power, peace and love, freedom and decolonization. Thank you for joining us again on this weekly rendezvous where we talk about Africa and the destiny of African people. My name is King Kabbalah, member of the African Continental Unity Party, and I greet you with our revolutionary greetings by saying that peace and love. Thank you very much. As I said, today, brothers and sisters, I want us to reflect on the time at which we are living. They said, of course, some people say that time is always a prophetic to the situation that people go through. If we understand the meaning of time, if we analyze the essence of time at which we are not going to be far from finding the solutions that we need to better our reality as African people. And this is true of us at the present moment. When you look at Africa, with all the problems that we are facing currently, with the hopeless future that we are foreseeing, actually, we need to question the essence of the present time in order to understand what is this time actually telling us. What is the meaning of the time that we are at the current moment, and what are the actions that we can start doing now in order to hope for a better future, to hope for change, and not just hoping for that change, but also making it reality, making it happening. Now, talking about time, what I want to reflect with us is to firstly look at the time in the past century so that we can understand what can be the meaning of time in this present century. You see, at around this very time in the past century, which means around 1920, 1923, the world was coming out of what is known as the First World War, which in reality, as an Afrocentric person, I would call it the first tribal Western War, right? So that war, which ended in 1919, somewhere around there, was all about setting up the world order in the European context, which literally was about positioning or confirming what European power was going to be the superpower or the dominant power in the world. So at this time, last century, it was the end of the First World War, or the first European tribalistic war, and the preparation for the Second World War, which is the second European tribalistic war. So all those two wars were all about determining or deciding what European power was going to be the dominant power of the world. So at that same time, Africa was under the yoke of colonialism, which is a most sophisticated form of slavery. That was the reality of Africa. Around 1923, Africa was languishing in the suffering, in the poverty, in all the precarities imposed upon Africans by colonialist Europeans. But there was something important that was taking place in the African diaspora, and that was the union. That was something important happening right there, because remember, from Marcus Garvey we had Kwame Nkrumah, as Kwame Nkrumah himself stated that the most philosophical and influential book that he has read was The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, which eventually laid the foundation to his struggle for African liberation and African economic development. So Marcus Garvey was happening at this very same time in the last century. And the struggle of Marcus Garvey laid the foundation for many people who had to come after Marcus Garvey, such as Kwame Ture, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Haile Selassie. All these people who have eventually fought for what is known today as the African independence had to build upon the struggle of Marcus Garvey in the 1923. Because at this time, 1923, the UNIA was actually at the peak of its success, of its activities. It was really making the black community in America or in the Western society vibrant, right? And even the Western society itself, the American government was shaking as a result of what Marcus Garvey's movement was doing at that time in last century. So now when we can try indeed to create some kind of a parallelism between 19th century and the present century. At this moment, 2023, we see almost the same picture that was happening in the last century in the world. Maybe with one simple thing that is missing, and I'm going to speak of that which is missing. Currently, what do we see? We see the world again in the conflict or preparing for a major conflict that will have to determine which other power will be the superpower of the world for the rest of this century. And I'm talking precisely about the conflict that we see between America and the entire Western society versus China, together with Russia, India, and also Iran or Korea and other countries who have aligned themselves with the Chinese and the Russians. So we see the world also divided and fighting to position one superpower again to be the one who will be the dominant power for the rest of this 21st century. And Africa, as it was in the last century, Africa is going through or is actually a subject of what we can call today neo-colonialism. Remember, the last century it was colonialism, and today we're talking about neo-colonialism. And what you need to understand is there's no difference between colonialism and neo-colonialism. The only thing is that neo-colonialism means a new form of colonialism, whereby the master or the oppressors are no longer present in Africa. They are now back in Europe, but they are controlling the reality of Africa through their agents, their puppets, who are in the leadership position in Africa, who try by all means to make sure that the Western society get what it wants. And that's the reality of today. So we have a world in conflict. We have Africa in bondage of neo-colonialism. But what is missing is that voice, that prophetic voice, as it was the case for Marcus Garvey, which will lay the foundation of the struggle that our children will have to fight in order to liberate totally Africa. Because, we are not fighting for anything else. We are not fighting to become Europeans. We are not fighting to make Africa as Europe or to make Africa as Japan. If you are fighting for that fight, my friend, you are fighting for a wrong fight. Because at the moment that you think that for you to be better, you need to become like something else. For your country, for Africa to be better, it has to become like America, like England. You will always occupy a second position after America or England, isn't it? Because you want to copy America. And America, it's also on its own journey to progress or to better itself. And you want to catch up with America, you will always occupy the second position after America. In other words, if you want to imitate people in life, you will always be lesser or a lesser version of the people or of the entities that you want to imitate. So us as a Pan-Africanist, we are not wanting to become like America, like France, like Germany, like England. What we want, what we're fighting for every single day, the mind that we wake up with every morning is to achieve two things: total liberation of Africa and its emancipation. That's the only thing. We are fighting for the total liberation of Africa and its emancipation. And that is actually the meaning of Pan-Africanism. The agenda of global unification of Africa, for a total liberation of Africa through scientific means. That is what we are fighting for. Now, in this fight, the question is, at this present moment, what is the prophetic voice? What is the voice of the moment, which is mobilizing, uniting African people for the future struggle before the end of the 21st century? Because in case you don't realize it, there is no hope with the current status quo, with the current setup. There is no hope of a better Africa with Africans in the future. They can be, when they say that Africa is the future, one thing you need to understand, that future is the future of European children, not the future of African children. As long as we are not doing for ourselves what we have been waiting for other people to do for us, there's no better future for African children. That future we think of, that we're talking of, that which Africa represent, is maybe the future of European children, not the future of African children. Therefore, the question is, what is that organization, as it was the case of Marcus Garvey in the last century, that is working to bring together African people for the struggle of liberation and emancipation? Probably there's none. What we have are political parties that are functioning according to tribalism, political parties that are functioning according to ethnicity, political parties that are functioning according to micro-tribal agenda, political parties that believe that we can change Congo, we can change Nigeria, we can change Ghana, we can change Guinea, we can change South Africa, and forgetting that if it was possible to change these colonial enclosures, we would have been able to do that in the first decades of post-colonial Africa, or the second decade. But we are counting over 50 decades of post-colonial Africa, and we haven't been able to see the change, simply because there's no individual problem. And because there's no individual problem, there's no individual solution. You see, we have a system that emphasizes more on private rights, private or individualism, to be more precise. And when you embrace this agenda of individualism, individual rights, individual economy, individual wealth, and stuff like that, you'll find yourself forced to stay alone to pursue your individual goals. And that is good, very good indeed for the system, because people who are alone can be better controlled, managed, dominated, and even governed by the international hegemony. But people who are together, working together in the ideas of Pan-Africanism, cannot be easily managed and dominated. That is why we are asking African people to turn our back on these individual countries, because they have never been our problems. Our problem is the total liberation and emancipation of Africa. So the question is, what is that prophetic voice of the moment that is bringing us together? All these political parties have no common or collective solution. They are talking about individual solutions which do not exist, because there was never individual problem. Those who oppress us, they don't oppress us based on our nationality or our so-called nationalism. They are oppressing us based on racism. As a race of the people, we represent something to them, which, as I said in earlier presentations, for European African people must be always eternal servants of European capitalism. Now, this being said, the bottom line here is, maybe the prophetic voice that we have currently is the African Continental Unity Party. This party is not a party owned by an individual, it's Africans' party, it's a people's party. It's not a party where you will find one charismatic leader who pretends to know the way forward, who pretends to know or to have a solution of what Africa needs. But this is a party that brings us together with all within our diversities. Because I was discussing with another brother who told me something very fundamental. There's no way that ancestors will give the solution to the African problem to one single African. Looking at how diverse we are, the solution to the African problem will come from the fact that African people must unite. So it will come in terms of puzzle. Each African person will have an idea. I will have an idea, you will have an idea, another person will have an idea, and when we bring these puzzles together, bits and pieces of ideas that we have, it will create a collective agenda of African liberation and emancipation. And the only platform through which we are able to do that is the African Continental Unity Party, which is the African movement, which is the movement owned by all African people. And when this movement comes in your country, in my so-called country, it transforms itself into a political party, and the aim is to create institutions in each country that can be united together, that can work together, and through the unity of those institutions we'll be able to create the unity of Africa and the common agenda of Africa and common destination of Africa, which is eventually the solution for African problem. And that solution is aiming towards one thing: total liberation and emancipation of Africa. So I don't know if you have had a chance to know about the African Continental Unity Party, but if you haven't, I will encourage you to check on the detail of this video to see what we have been able to do, what we have been doing, and what we are intending to do for the future of Africa. And we encourage you to join us so that together, at this particular moment, at this prophetic time where the world is in turmoil, the world is preparing for conflicts, we can replicate the same thing that Marcus Garvey did in the last century, so that moving forward, our children will build on this, as Kwame Nkrumah, as Sekou Touré, as Kwame Touré, as Thomas Sankara, as Patrice Lumumba built upon the struggle of Marcus Garvey to eventually create certain conditions that we can call today the independence of Africa. The question is, what will be Africa in the future if we don't prepare it today? So we invite you to join us in the African Continental Unity Party. Please check below the description to see all the details possible to allow you or to help you to join us and to be part of our action team, to be part of our strategic team, so that together we can make this happening. We can lay the foundation for a better Africa. You see, we have inherited Africa, which is neo-colonized. We have inherited Africa of poverty, even though the resources of Africa are enough to make each African person billionaires, if not multi-billionaires. But we have inherited poverty, we have inherited precarity, we have inherited war, we have inherited tribalism, we have inherited racism, we have inherited all kinds of injustices that do not allow us to develop a better future for ourselves. We have inherited miseducation, you name them. Maybe the most efficient thing that we have inherited is religion, because that's where we seem to be more efficient, right? But the question is, what are we willing to hand over to our children? What do we want our children to inherit from us? The very same misery that we have inherited from our parents? No. For us revolutionary Pan-Africanists, we don't want to hand over the same picture to our children. And if we are unable to really create the condition of total liberation and emancipation of Africa with our current struggle, with our current fight, the only thing we will have to hand over, the only thing we will have to hand over to our children will be the struggle. If we cannot give them prosperity, if we cannot give them dignity, if we cannot give them the things that we want at the present time, let us at least give them the struggle. Let us at least really give them this inheritance of struggle, of fight, so that they can build on our struggle. They can continue to fight to liberate Africa and to emancipate Africa, so that when they look back on the past, as we are looking back on our ancestors, on our great ancestors, such as Sheikh Anta Diop, such as Thomas Sankara, such as Kwame Nkrumah, such as Patrice Lumumba, such as Malcolm X, such as Imhotep, Ptahhotep, we are proud of them, and we are willingly joining this struggle in order to make sure that we complete the fight for African liberation and emancipation, we must do the same thing for our children, to remember us in the same way that we are remembering Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, and all these people who laid the foundation for the struggle that we are doing today. So, what are you belonging to? You hope for the better Africa. Which organization are you part of? So that we can make sure that what we want for Africa to be, we are making it happening. Which organization are you part of? So if you are not part of any organization that is working for a betterment of Africa, we invite you to join the African Continental Unity Party, so that together we can bring into existence our dreams, our idea, our hope of a better Africa, emancipated, freed, and liberated from Western hegemony, Western domination, and Western oppression. This time is a very significant time for the future of Africa, because if we lose it, if we miss this opportunity, our children we're never gonna know what to do. We're never gonna understand what to do. Thank you very much. If you have enjoyed it, please share the video, subscribe and like it, encourage us, support us in any way you can, so that we can improve on what we do and make sure that this struggle is more efficient. If you have 2 shoes, please sell 1 and buy a sword. If you have 2 trousers, please sell 1 and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is in the mind, because if we are not in charge of our mind, then our bodies are the tools that the oppressors will use to oppress us and to oppress our people. Thank you very much. Freedom and decolonization, peace and love. See you next time.